The LA Kings season comes to an end. We wrap up the series against the Oilers, including a look at the Game 6 loss, talk about how we should feel about this season, and take a quick look ahead to next season on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love you to leave a positive comment for us on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. We're also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. At last check, we were at 1,711 subscribers. We are obviously on a streak of 7 straight months with over 100 subscribers or more. Per month, we're heading towards 2,000, hopefully. And thank you for all of you that have liked and subscribed to the YouTube channel. Really appreciate all your support going forward. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast. It's a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 16 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for 30 years. The LA Kings season ended with a disappointing 5-4 home loss to the Edmonton Oilers in Game 6 of the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. As we have done all season after a game, we're going to do a quick recap before we get our thoughts into the series this offseason and next season. Of course, Game 6 was an elimination game for LA. Win, and you force a Game 7 in Edmonton, lose, and the season is over. And in that kind of must-win scenario, you would expect the Kings to come out more aggressive and play with some desperation in an elimination game. And that is what they did. However, it still didn't translate into the Kings getting an early lead. Just a minute 25 into the game, Connor McDavid would score to make it 1-0 Edmonton. The Kings would respond later in the period on a shot from the point from defenseman Sean Durzi. Gabe Vilardi was providing a screen. It got through Oilers netminder Stuart Skinner, and we were tied at 1. About 4 minutes later, Klim Kostin would score for Edmonton, first of 2 goals for him in the game, and the Oilers would reclaim a 2-1 lead heading into the second. Kings would get a power play opportunity in that second period, the first power play of the game, but as the power play went along, Kings forward Alex Iafallo would take a tripping call. It canceled out the man advantage, made it 4-on-4, and then gave the Oilers a brief power play, which of course they would score on, thanks to Leon Draisaitl's NHL-leading 7th goal of these playoffs. Needing a response, LA would claw back to tie the game thanks to a pair of power play goals. First from Adrian Kempe, his team leading 5th of the playoffs. Then it was Kevin Fiala scoring his first ever playoff goal as a member of the LA Kings, and we were tied at 3-3. Unfortunately, Klim Kostin would score his second goal of the night. Edmonton would hold a 4-3 lead heading into the third period. In the third, LA's Philip Deneau would tie up the game on a misplay by Oilers goalie Stuart Skinner, who apparently broke his stick, or maybe he was already playing with a damaged stick, but he turned it over. Deneau was right there to score a shorthanded goal. The building was rocking, and LA had tied the game 4-4. Felt like this one might go overtime. However, just 3 minutes left in regulation. Kyler Yamamoto, a former junior LA King, scored his first goal of the playoffs, gave Edmonton a 5-4 lead, and they would hold on to win by that final score. This was obviously a very frustrating loss in a number of ways, not just for the obvious reason it ended the season, but the Kings did a lot of good things in this game. I said one of my keys going into Game 6 was putting pressure, putting shots on rookie goalie Stuart Skinner, and the Kings did that. They outshot the Oilers 44-26. Just the second time in the series that the Kings had outshot the Oilers. The other time was Game 5, and they only outshot them by one more shot. But with all those shots, the Kings still could never get the go-ahead goal to get the win and ultimately force a deciding Game 7. I said the Kings had to be competitive in the special teams battle, and LA actually won the special teams battle. They had 2 power play goals and a shorthanded goal compared to the Oilers' 1 power play goal on 2 opportunities. Kings out-hit the Oilers 32-22. But it still all did not result in what the most important thing was, and that was a victory. Looking at the series as a whole, which the Kings lost 4-2, I think the Kings were very much in every game that they lost except for Game 5 in Edmonton. Games 4 and 6 were the two games that the Kings will look back on with regret, especially game 4 at home, jumping out to a 3-0 lead and eventually losing that game in overtime 5-4. They stole game 1 on the road, and they pulled that one out. They tied it up with just 17 seconds left, then won it in overtime. And if the Kings could have just won their home games in the series, they would have won the series. Unfortunately, that did not happen. As for why the Kings lost the series, I think the biggest reason was the Oilers' power play, or maybe the Kings' penalty kill, or maybe a combination of the two. We all remember that the Kings' PK was called out by GM Rob Blake back on December the 1st. The team did improve in that area, but the Oilers' power play absolutely killed the Kings in this series. Now, Edmonton's power play was great before the playoffs. They finished the regular season with the highest power play percentage in NHL history at 32.4%. But against LA, they took it to another level. They were 9 for 16 with the man advantage. That is 56.3%. That is outrageous. The Kings were not bad on the power play in the postseason, 33.3%. That's fifth best amongst playoff teams after the first round. But again, good, but not good enough. The Oilers superstars were superstars. Connor McDavid, who's going to be the league MVP. Leon Draisaitl, who right now is the front runner, I think, to be the playoff MVP. Both played great. And it is funny that some thought that Connor McDavid didn't have a great first series, but he had 3 goals and 7 assists for 10 points in 6 games. That's very good. There are plenty of players who would love to have had that first round, but obviously he has set the standard very, very high. But Draisaitl was the killer against the Kings. 7 goals, 4 assists, 12 points in 6 games. For the Kings, Adrian Kempe had a fine playoff series, 5 goals, 3 assists for 8 points to lead LA. Certainly didn't help that Kevin Fiala was only available for 3 games in the series, although he did finish with 6 points in those 3 games. Victor Arvidsson had some nice things that he did in the playoffs after missing all of the playoffs last year. He had 6 assists in those 6 games. Andrei Kopitar, 7 points in 6 games. Gabe Velarde did chip in with 2 goals and 4 points. Alex Iafallo had 3 goals. Overall good, but not good enough to win the series. And that's the theme of the LA Kings against the Edmonton Oilers. A lot of good things, but not good enough to beat a very good Edmonton team that is moving on, and the LA Kings are going home. Would Phoenix Copley have made a difference in Game 6? We're going to talk about that and the Kings' goaltending issues during the season and in the future. But first, I want to remind you that today's episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, is brought to you by Athletic Greens. With one delicious scoop of AG1, you are absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. AG1 contains less than 1 gram of sugar, costs you less than $3 a day, and it's just 1 scoop in a cup of water. That's it. No need for a million different pills or supplements to look out for your health. And to make things even easier, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. That's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Now, we knew going into the season that goaltending was going to be an issue. At some point, we're going to do an episode where I go back and look at the 5 burning questions we had at the beginning of the year for the LA Kings and kind of see how those questions were answered. But one of them was, who is going to be the Kings goalie? Now, we certainly had a different outlook back then with Jonathan Quick and Cal Peterson. Obviously, that did not work out. But the Kings goaltending situation did get stabilized by Phoenix Copley, who came in and did some very good things, resulted in him getting a 1-year contract extension. And the Kings certainly solidified things in net by going out and getting Jonas Korpisalo at the trade deadline. It seemed most people, including me, were in favor of Jonas Korpisalo starting in net in that elimination Game 6. And it seemed like most people agreed with that. But maybe the Kings would have had a different fate with Phoenix Copley and net. We'll never know. I thought there was an argument to be made at the time to start Copley, although, like I said, my decision would have been to go with Jonas Korpisalo. I'm not going to second guess that. But, Korpisalo had his moments in this series. I don't think he had a bad game six, to be honest with you. I mean, there was a tip in goal by Connor McDavid. McDavid and Draisaitl hooked up for a power play goal, passing it across the ice on a shot that no goalie is going to stop. There was a rebound goal after a great save from Korpisalo. But like most everything else with the Kings, he was good, but not good enough. I think the issue with Korpisalo for me was that in the big games that the Kings had a chance to win, especially games 4 and 6, the deciding goal wasn't a great goal allowed. Game 4, Zach Hyman, wrist shot from just outside the left faceoff dot, was stoppable. And in a playoff game, if you're a big time goalie, you got to make that stop. Game 6, just a floater through bodies from Kyler Yamamoto for the game winner. Like I said, you got to find a way to make those saves in the playoffs. And for you everydayers, those that listen every day or watch every day, we are going to do deep dives on positions for the LA Kings going forward. Certainly, the goalie position is certainly specifically something we're going to really look at now and for the future. As far as is Jonas Korpisalo part of the future for the LA Kings? He is an unrestricted free agent. We knew that when they picked him up at the trade deadline from Columbus. The answer for me is I'm unsure if he is part of the future for the LA Kings. Certainly, his asking price will certainly play a lot into that. I don't know that his performance this postseason did much to elevate other teams wanting him. I think he's still a valuable player. But what he's asking for certainly is going to determine whether he comes back with the LA Kings or not. I don't know that he played his way to a big contract for what he did this season. It was good for the Kings. Certainly, he's a guy I think is in consideration. I have not done a lot of research at this point as to what the free agent market looks like for the goaltending position this offseason and what other options may be out there for the LA Kings. But I think for me, the feeling I have is that Korpisalo could come back at the right price, but I also don't think that he showed out in this postseason to where he's going to be in high demand by the Kings or by other teams. Again, he's certainly a very, very good number 2 goalie. I think he's a serviceable number 1 goalie, not an elite goalie. But look, let's be honest. If you've watched the Stanley Cup playoffs, like Stuart Skinner, I know he's a rookie, but he certainly isn't an elite goalie. Some of the other teams that have advanced, Laurent Brossoit with Vegas, I don't think anyone's going to say he's an elite goalie. Ilya Samsonov in Toronto, not an elite goalie. So there's not, I mean, maybe Jake Ottinger with Dallas is one guy that certainly would stand out. Maybe an Igor Shesterkin with the Rangers when you're looking at really elite goalies. But I think you can win in the playoffs with a goalie like Jonas Korpisalo, but the support has to be there. He's got to get the support goal scoring. He's got to get the support defensively. I don't know that he got the support defensively. Actually, forget that. He didn't get the support defensively as a team that he needed. And of course, the penalty kill, like we said, didn't get the help there. So I would not say that re-signing Jonas Korpisalo is a priority for the LA Kings, but I don't think that they've closed the door on bringing him back either. I think it's very much up in the air, as is the goaltending position going forward for the LA Kings. We know that Cal Peterson is still out there. Like I said, Phoenix Copley has been re-signed for 1 year, and what other positions, what other goaltenders they bring in to fill the position remains to be seen. But it is still a big question mark for the Kings going into this offseason. I don't know that it was answered this postseason, but like I said, Jonas Korpisalo, I think he's an option, but not a definite option. I mentioned the Kings had their exit interviews earlier today. I think I mentioned that anyway. Jonas Korpisalo, by the way, said he loved his time in LA. So for that's worth, he did enjoy playing and being a part of the LA Kings organization. So that's always nice to hear. But if you don't know, the exit interviews are basically the final meeting between the players, the coaches, the general manager with the media before they head off to wherever for the offseason. And like I said, I'm going to do a deep dive on tomorrow's show on the exit interview, specifically with what general manager Rob Blake had to say about this season and going into next season. But clearly the Kings have to be better. I think one thing that kind of jumped off the page to me as far as what was some of the comments made in the exit interviews, the players, they were frustrated. They were disappointed, said they had to be better, all that kind of stuff. But head coach Todd McClellan said something that I thought really rang true. And he said, basically, the Oilers aren't going anywhere, and the Kings have to improve to meet that standard that the Oilers are playing at. And he's absolutely right. Leon Draisaitl is 27. Connor McDavid is 26. They're both under contract for the next 2 years together following this season. And you got to believe that going forward, the Oilers are going to pay them absolutely anything they want to keep them for their whole careers with the Edmonton Oilers. So there's no avoiding that. And with the current playoff format that is implemented by the NHL, where you're going to probably meet a division foe in the opening round or at least the second round, then yeah, the Oilers are going to be a playoff team, we think, for years to come, as are the Kings. So I think Tom McClellan's 100% right. It is not unlikely that we'll see Kings Oilers in the playoffs again in the near future, and that the Kings are going to have to step up, make improvements, play better, make additions to the roster to be able to get by an Edmonton team that is very, very good now and should be a playoff team at least going forward. Certainly the Kings aren't going to be able to match up player for player with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. There aren't many teams in the NHL that can, maybe a handful at most. But even elite talent like those two guys, they only play a third of the game. Now, they may have a huge impact in that third of the game that they play, but the point is that this is still very much a team game. The Kings need to improve as a team, which they did from last season to this season. They need to do that again going forward. And again, we're going to talk a lot more about that in episodes going forward. But the Kings are going to have to overcome the Edmonton Oilers likely going forward if they're going to ultimately have the success in the postseason that we all want them to have. Taking a quick look ahead for the LA Kings, I think the forward positions pretty much set. The Kings have no unrestricted free agents amongst their forward group this offseason to re-sign. Adrian Kempe, Kevin Fiala, Philip Deneau, Trevor Moore, they're all locked up for the next 3 years and beyond. There are some other issues, Andrei Kopitar, Victor Arvidsson, their contracts will be up after this coming season. You've got a guy like a Gabe Velarde who's going to be a restricted free agent, so he's still under team control. But there are some things to do as far as the forwards group, but it's mostly about the defense. The Kings need to upgrade defensively. And again, for you everydayers who listen every day, watch every day, we're going to get more detailed into the areas the Kings need to improve on in future episodes, like defense, and we'll look at the players individually going forward. But I think the priority for me for the LA Kings going forward is re-signing left-handed shooting defenseman Vladislav Gavrikov. Unlike Korpisalo, who came over with Gavrikov from Columbus at the trade deadline, I thought Gavrikov did likely make himself more in demand with his very solid play with the Kings at the end of the regular season and in the playoffs. I don't think there is any doubt the Kings want him back. I know Drew Doughty in his exit interviews said he's actively recruiting Gavrikov to return. His defensive partner, Matt Roy, said the same, talked about how great he fit in with the LA Kings. And all indications are that Gavrikov very much enjoyed his time here in Los Angeles. Now, he is 27 years old, made $2.8 million this season. And since he is a defensive defenseman, he's not going to demand big money, but I do think that he's probably in line for a raise. Bottom line is, no matter how much he enjoyed his time in LA, he is going to go where he can get paid the most. And that might not be with the Kings. Kings will also be adding talented rookie defenseman Brant Clark on the blue line next season. So that should help the defense in and of itself to shore up things with just the talent level going up. But the Kings certainly would be much better off on the blue line next season if they can sign Vladislav Gavrikov for next year and beyond. To me, that's the big question for the Kings going into this offseason, or the priority. Can they re-sign Vladislav Gavrikov? That is the big question. The ultimate question, though, is, was this season a failure for the LA Kings? That is next. But first, the Stanley Cup playoffs are continuing, unfortunately, without the LA Kings. And it has been an amazing first round so far, with the Maple Leafs finally getting out of the first round, and the President's Trophy winning Bruins and the defending Stanley Cup champion Avalanche already out of the postseason. You can get updated on all of the Stanley Cup playoff action with Locked On NHL, available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Locked On NHL is covering all of the Stanley Cup playoff action. I was asked during our Kings recent fan feedback show last week, if the Kings didn't win this series, was it a failure? And again, for you everydayers, you already know my answer on this, but I said no. Mostly for this simple reason. Were the Kings the better team against the Oilers? Edmonton finished ahead of the Kings in the standings. They had more points. But watching these playoff games, and I know we have seen upsets. We talked about the Bruins and the Avalanche being knocked out. So sometimes the better team doesn't win. But did you ever watch these games and think, man, the Kings are the better team? They're just not getting the breaks or whatever. I didn't. I always thought that the Oilers looked like the better team. And I thought the Kings were battling and scratching and clawing for everything they had. And there were certainly times they absolutely did that. Certainly game one, battling back from down, scoring 3 goals in the third and winning in overtime. The overtime victories the Kings had were, I mean, hard fought. They showed a ton of heart. But I just thought that the better team won the series. Am I disappointed? Of course I am. Are there areas the Kings can improve on going forward? Absolutely, to try and get a different result. And like I said, I think that the biggest areas of the Kings improving their penalty kill, improving defensively. But this regular season for the Kings, they had the second most points and the second most wins in franchise history. I think it's fair to say that that makes it not a failure this season. Now, I know that the playoffs are the ultimate judge, and because the Kings didn't go farther this year than they did last year, I can certainly understand some people might say that's a failure, I guess. But I have a hard time saying that this season is a failure. Some people might think so. I would say that's not correct, but that's why we're all fans. We all have our different opinions. And I don't have a defeatist attitude. It's not like I'm going into this saying that I'm somehow satisfied with the season they had because of those second most wins and those second most points. No, I'm not satisfied at all, but I also am realistic. And I think the Edmonton Oilers are a Stanley Cup contender. I would not be surprised at all if they won it all this year. So you do have to take that into consideration. I do think the Kings lost to a better team. Now we'll wait and see. If the Oilers get knocked out in the next round in 4 or 5 games, maybe I'll change my opinion on that. But for me, honestly, I just have a hard time saying that this season was a failure. A disappointment, sure, but a failure, I think that's going a little bit too far. Now, if I was the host of Locked On Bruins or Locked On Avalanche doing a show right now, I would have a different tune. I would say it's absolutely a failure. But like I said, the Kings going into this postseason were not considered a Stanley Cup favorite. Like I said, most people didn't pick them to win this series against the Oilers. I thought if they could somehow scratch and claw their way to a victory, that they'd have a decent chance of making it all the way to the final. Because if you can beat this Edmonton team, you can beat anybody in the Western Conference. But obviously that did not happen. The Kings are a relatively young team. I believe it's something like 7 players, or maybe it's more than that, like 12 players under the age of 30. They were one of the younger teams in the playoffs. When you look at the youngest rosters in the NHL, the great majority of them were some of the worst teams in the league this year, like Buffalo and Columbus and teams like that. So the Kings, again, there's talent there that can get better going forward. Gabe Vilardi, Quentin Byfield, Arthur Kaliev, Sean Durzi. These are young players that should get better going forward. The Kings, again, certainly have areas to address: penalty kill, defense, goaltending. And yes, this season was a disappointment, but I said, I can't say it's a failure. I personally can't say it's a failure. There is work to be done, but the good news is I truly believe that the better days lie ahead for the LA Kings. And same goes for this show. Locked On LA Kings is your team every day. We aren't going anywhere now that the season is over. There is still a lot to talk about. And like I've said, we're going to get a lot more specific on grading certain positions and certain players, as well as the coaching staff, the front office. The NHL draft is next month. Now that we're in May, just a month away. The free agent signing period is coming up in July. So hopefully you will stick around with us and become one of those everydayers that I've talked about. I definitely want to thank you for all the support you have shown me and this show this season. I took it over in July as the host of Locked On LA Kings, and just as an example, the YouTube channel subscribers was around 250. 10 months later, we're at over 1,700. So I'm definitely proud of the growth that this show has shown. And now that I'll be hosting for a full off season, hoping to continue to grow the show going forward. You guys have done a great job supporting the podcast and the YouTube channel. And like I said, I really appreciate it. I would also appreciate you guys letting your fellow Kings fans know that Locked On LA Kings is your team every day, and that continues in the off season. And like I said, just because the season is over doesn't mean that there isn't things to discuss and debate and give our opinions on going forward. So again, thanks again for all your support. Looking forward to some more great shows coming up this off season. And for you everydayers, looking ahead to this week, tomorrow, I want to really get into some of the comments made in the exit interviews, especially the comments made by Kings general manager Rob Blake, break down what he said about this past season and what the direction is in the team going forward, what things need to improve, and see what we agree or disagree with him on what he had to say. On Wednesday's show, I want to have a Kings fan feedback show. With the season ending and everything is still fresh in your minds, I want to know what you think about this Kings season. Do you disagree with me? Is this season a failure? What changes need to be made going forward? Are you optimistic about the future of the LA Kings? Again, Wednesday show will be a Kings fan feedback show about this season and the playoffs. Get your emails in now. LockedOnEddie@gmail.com. EDDIE, LockedOnEddie@gmail.com. You can always leave your comments for the YouTube episodes in the comment section below. We are going to continue to have fan feedback shows going forward throughout the offseason. I want you to have a voice on this show going forward. So again, Wednesday, fan feedback show. I hope you'll participate in that because I'm sure there's a lot of opinions on things going forward. Thursday show, we're going to look ahead to what the bright spots were for the Kings this past season and some of the strengths they have going forward in the offseason. And Friday, looking to schedule a special guest to help break down this past season as well. Point is, season is over for the Kings, but Locked On LA Kings is still your team every day. So we would also love for you to stay interactive with the show by following us on Twitter and Instagram. It's at Locked On LA Kings. And yes, I know I need to do a better job on the Instagram page. It's one of those things that is on the list for things to improve for Locked On LA Kings going forward. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.